Amazing. Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome to those that are watching from LinkedIn, from Facebook, from YouTube. This is the Blackwing Foundation's Pathways to Creativity Forum. And we are here with some amazing educators. And we are going to go through journeys and go through different experiences in how we bring creativity, bring creative experiences, and foster that creative problem solving for all students that we work with in our schools and beyond. So without further ado, I would like to have all of the guests, both those from the Blackwing Foundation as well as the guest educators for tonight's forum, to introduce themselves. I want to first start by introducing Charles, and he's going to just introduce and share a little bit of background, a little bit of the vision as the co-founder of the Blackwing Foundation. Thank you so much, Charles.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you everybody for visiting and attending this, and especially thanks to this incredible forum that we've put together here with your help, Michael, and with the help of Dave Wish, of course, who's brought a couple of people in. Dave and I have known each other a long time, the Blackwing Foundation. I'm the founder of the Blackwing Foundation with my wife, Ginger, and we've been supporting arts and music education through our Ignite the Arts program, grant program, for a number of years. And Little Kids Rock, the precursor to Music Will, was one of our first recipients and the longest running recipient and probably the most grandest recipient. And Dave's just done some wonderful things through the years. And so I'm so happy that he be a part of this first inaugural forum discussion for us. I'm really excited about this conversation. I think it's an important conversation. And I just love what we're doing here, and love having Courtney, my daughter-in-law, here as part of the team now on Blackwing Foundation. She and Justine are the visionaries for our Pathways to Creativity program, which she can tell more about later on here.
Absolutely. Well, Courtney, that's a perfect segue for you to introduce and share a little bit about yourself.
Great. Well, thanks, everybody. I'm Courtney Berolzheimer, Program Director here at the Blackwing Foundation. I spent 10 years in the classroom where I taught a variety of subjects, anywhere from middle school math, probably one of my favorites, and to also just teaching gen ed at an arts integrated school. After those 10 years, I decided to leave the classroom and pursue this passion of keeping art and music in the classroom, because I saw firsthand how important it is. But I know the demands of the classroom teacher. It's not easy out there. And that is why we've developed Pathways to Creativity, and we want to keep sparking kids' creativity.
Amazing. Well, we'll just move across. So we have Ann Cosma here. Ann, please share a little bit about yourself. So happy to have you on here.
Yay. Well, hello, and thank you for having me. Hi, everybody. My name is Ann Cosma. I am a former first grade teacher out of Southern California. When I left the classroom, I became a K-8 innovation coach in my district. So 17 years in public education before joining Microsoft in 2018, spending 6 years working to support global community and amplify student voice on the Flipgrid team. And last August, I joined the Adobe for Education team. I'm an education evangelist. I describe my job as a teacher helping teachers, but I love not only celebrating creativity, but working for a company that believes in creativity and empowering that with flexible pathways is an absolute honor. So thanks for having me today.
Absolutely. Dave, we'll go with you. Please introduce yourself.
Well, it's great to be here. Thanks, Charles, and everybody. Nice to see folks. I'm also a former first grade school teacher. Maybe there's a theme, 10 years. I also took first grade for 2 years. That's my expertise. I was so good, they wanted me to stick around, show the other kids how it was done. And while working as a first grade school teacher, I started a free music program, a guitar class for kids at my school, because there was no real music program there. In a very long story, 26-year-long story short, that's what led me to ultimately found Music Will, the nonprofit that I'm most associated with. And we transform children's lives by transforming music education in the public schools. And I have the good fortune of working with Latasha, who's on our board of directors. So I will just And also, I don't know about on your screen, but next to me, she's like, we're in the same photo doing. I'll just turn it over to you, Latasha.
Oh, thank you, Dave. Good evening, everyone. And thank you so much for having me. My name is Dr. Latasha Castro-Lala. I am the supervisor of visual and performing arts for Passaic Public Schools here in New Jersey. I also serve as the president of the New Jersey Music Administrators Association, and I'm fortunate enough to be on the board of Music Will. And I come to this work as a 20-plus year educator who's done everything from pre-K to higher ed. I was a second grade teacher. I wasn't a first grade teacher, but I was a music teacher before that too. And so what I do every day is try to create really innovative ways for kids to express themselves through the arts, sharing their life story, sharing the experience that they live in, and giving them the freedom to have choice in that process. And I'm one of the people fighting to keep all of our arts-based education alive and well. It is very challenging in these very tight fiscal times, but what we know best is that kids have the ability to express, to love, and to share their joy in the world through the arts. And we try to make that happen every day. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely amazing. And Tim, last but not least.
My name is Tim Needles. A pleasure to be here. I've been an art teacher and STEAM teacher for 27 years. So primarily high school, but now I'm K-12. So I work with technology and help integrate. I'm also an artist and writer. So I wrote the book Steam Power for ISTE ASCD. And I've been working as, I love the arts. So, and any kind of art. I worked as a music journalist and arts journalist. I got to hang out with Little Kids Rock. You guys gave me an amazing moment where I got to interview Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band at one of the events, which is pretty pip. It was a school night, so I had to go to school the next morning at 7 o'clock, but it was a fun thing to share with students. I've been working in the arts, working with different kind of creativity. I'm also, for NAEA, we have a terrific program called Connected Arts Network. So I run a PLC of arts educators. So it pairs together theater, dance, music, and art. So I run a PLC nationwide with that. Pleasure to be here.
Amazing. Well, there's an exciting conversation to be had. And I was sharing in the backstage for those that are listening, the question of, I like an icebreaker to get things going. So give it to us in advance so we can really think about it. So I didn't give them too much time, but it is a really great question to start the conversation, which is when we think of the math classroom, we think of coverage. There's no time for creativity. And those art teachers out there that are able to merge that together, how, as artists, as musicians, how do we bring creativity into places that it might look like oil and water when you think of bringing it in? So just to share a little bit of a story, a little bit of an insight or a lesson that you knocked it out of the park in the integrating into the math classroom. So we'll start with Courtney.
Gosh, one of my favorite lessons. I always use index cards to teach geometry so that kids could, see the shape in front of them. How does a rectangle become a triangle and relate those formulas? And so one day I pulled it out and they were like, oh no, it's geometry. And I had them start cutting shapes from one side and moving it to the other and then top to bottom. Then I had them start tracing it and boom, we were doing tessellations and made beautiful pieces of artwork out of that. And the kids' minds were blown that their math just became their artwork.
Amazing.
I'll follow on two things. One, when I was I think when you integrate the arts into any subject, or actually any subject into another subject, there's an alchemy that happens. There's a natural leveling up of both subjects, because math and science and the arts are really only, of course, they're interesting on their own, but they're most interesting in the rich fabric of human experience. So one of the things that I did when I was a first grade school teacher is I would have themes for a year. And 1 year, the theme was, my class was a store and everything was for sale. Everything was based on supply and demand. And it was first grade, so things weren't that expensive. Digits didn't go that high, but boy, were people intrinsically motivated because it sort of became a game. It was a game to do that. The other thing I would say is that, of course, Courtney's got a math machine in her background, and I do as well. There are like online drum machines are everywhere, and drumming is something that you can do through programming, and that's fractions. I mean, there's a million different ways that you can start to cross-reference in any subject and breathe new life into it.
Dave, I'll jump in on that because you said like gamify it, and that goes along with a motto I had in my classroom that's carried on into my professional work, and it's play to learn. And I wanted to engage my young scholars with active learning, building, making, doing, creating, going hands-on. Storytelling was a big piece in my classroom across all curricular areas. But we were making mathematical videos and using the real world environment around us or any kind of item. So going on geography, like geometric shape hunts on our playground, or letting students create, I mean, from Lego to other like realia and tactile things in the classroom. So my whole vibe is play to learn and push all the buttons. And so that brings the active engagement, but really it's hard fun, it's disguised learning, and then the scholars are more likely to retain information and reach that academic success. So play to learn, that's my vibe for bringing more creativity into mathematics.
I'll hop in. I really believe that students should have learning that makes sense and connects to their life. So what we try to do is not just look at math versus art or music. How is it all coexisting together? So where do I find the artistic elements in math? And where do I find math and artistic elements? And thinking about how interconnected the world really is. I think in schools, we kind of segment things in their own lanes. But really, what's really most important is that we pull aspects together so that students can do that. So what we've been really working hard is trying to make sure that students have the ability to bring the skill sets from one content into another, and then just practice those same skill sets. So in some of our visual arts classes, we're also talking about, we have measurement, we've got perspective, we've got proportion. We try to find out, what does that mean from the math lens? And how do we see that? How does that shape and change what you're creating? And how does it give you some alternative views? And so what we've been experiencing is seeing that students are really saying, this is not separate at all. It's really working in tandem to help increase my learning. And when I'm making those connections, I learn deeper and greater, and I make further connections. So we're working hard to try to help folks see the connection versus keeping things so separate.
Yeah, and I remember being in school, like math was my least favorite subject. I was just sweating. So like it created phobia for me. And then, as a teacher, as an art teacher, I love integrating with other subjects. It was great to go into a math classroom and kind of see, the intersection of where these things mix. And for me, people like Jerry Garcia was a great entrant to kind of like, using fractals or music. And then people, of course, like Dali and MC Escher are great using art history. And these days it's so much easier because like you're able to use like coding, and you could actually do animation based on math. And I would have done so much better in math today with all of this integration, because knocking down those silos in between, the school system is really important. I think, the area in between math and art is really interesting, and there's lots of terrific work there. So kind of just sharing that and letting the students create.
Yeah, I'm not a teacher and never, but I did pretty well in math. Always been a math guy, but I have one story about, I think, math and art that from an example from one of our limited editions that we did at Blackwing volumes. We do these limited editions, and we did a pencil celebrating the Fibonacci sequence, the golden ratio, and that applies mathematically to so much things just in nature. And you can bring the math, the natural world together, the art creation. So there's so much that you could do with just something like a topic like that to integrate it. So it was a fun story for us to do. And I know Courtney loved that. I think that's always been her favorite release from the pencil line.
So these are some amazing insights, and I'm glad we finished off with the topic of a pencil. There was one time that I had an opportunity to share with a school district in Texas some of my ideas around creativity. And I began the conversation describing a device, and it's a device that can communicate effectively. It can be able to share information, and even share information at scale. And I started to go through this conversation. It sounded like I was talking about an iPhone, an iPad, a Chromebook. What's the latest tech? And then in the end, I pulled out a pencil from my pocket and I showed it to the crowd. And the next question is really, I don't want to go like super deep into AI, because if not, then we're just another AI live stream in education. It's like enough already. But I think the question of how we utilize tools, how do we view right now the opportunities, not the worries, not the be aware, just when you look at creativity in schools, does it feel more urgent today than maybe 5 years, 10 years, 20 years ago, just because of where technology is heading? And why is it so important to consider this right now as maybe a moment where it's mission critical to think about that? Anyone can start.
Well, I'll jump in and just kind of share some foundational thoughts for me. Like, I think it definitely feels like this sense of urgency. Kids are growing up in a completely different time than my own upbringing and my elementary school years from the 80s into the 90s. Like, we're equipping kids to deal with way more complex things, deal with problem solving in new ways, things that we probably were previously inconceivable in the 80s of what we're all experiencing now with the advancement of technology, et cetera. But I think the sense of urgency and why creativity in schools is like so pivotal to me, like beginning to lead with empathy and innovation and empowering that kind of agency in thinking. But we all know that's like a springboard and transformation to the exploration and like engaging in different ways in learning, because learning looks different, and we're celebrating neurodivergent thinking and broadening hearts and minds and deepening perspective across human experiences, which are vastly different and diverse. And even the conversations are shifting. So there is a sense of urgency, and that's just what comes to mind first to kind of set some foundational like thinking, but I can't wait to hear what other people think about this.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, this moment, especially technology, like this could be the moment for creativity really in schools, because, education has been like kind of dragging along, and we kind of needed a change. The pandemic changed things, but, not enough, and it's not equal. It's like, it's very mishmashed. So it's prevalent in some places and not others. But, with the age of AI really here, I think this is one of the things, like the human element is more important than ever. And, we bring the creativity to the tool. So it's like, AI can't be creative for us. You need to really exercise those creative muscles. So I think it's gonna be more important now than ever. And I think, unfortunately, our school system wasn't built to really help creativity. And I think as educators, it's our job to kind of bring this to the forefront. Sorry.
Yeah, I actually see AI, if done well, as a tool to help become more efficient for the basic academic learning. There are models out there now where one of the advantages of AI is that, when you're a teacher in a classroom with 30 students, it's hard. Everybody's on a different continuum, but AI has the ability to be a tutor also and be tuned into an individual student's needs. And in fact, I just learned yesterday about a school that's focused on condensing all the academic elements to something that they can get done in 2 hours a day, freeing the rest of the day up for more creative, interdisciplinary, collaborative type learning with guiding, where the students are actually doing projects and things together, but they're actually excelling on the academic side because they've got more individualized attention, assessing where they are and knowing where they are and moving them forward. It's a very innovative concept. And I think that's something that could be a very strong element of using AI in education.
I like to think of creativity through like a wide fisheye lens, because things look cooler through fisheye lenses. If you've never tried one, you should. I have a hard time thinking about the singular issue of artificial intelligence or nuclear proliferation or climate issues or political polarization, because all of them share one thing in common, which is to say that the solution to those problems, to the extent that we're going to find any, resides in the creativity of the next generation. The one thing I will say specifically about AI, and of course, AI is a tool. It's a tool unlike any other tool we've ever had. But one thing that I feel strongly is that tools are not inherently good or bad. It really depends on how they're utilized. A knife in a surgeon's hand saves lives. A knife in a mugger's hand can intimidate or hurt a person. Nuclear energy can help solve certain problems, and nuclear weapons can be very problematic. But I think that the one thing I'll say specifically about AI is it can't know the human heart, and it can't know the right solutions that are humane, and those are things that we're going to have. I mean, whatever it can, hopefully, I hope it finds cures for terrible diseases and solves all of these problems. But the thing about creativity, especially the arts, they're generally very social. They happen in a social context. They build human bonds, human to human. And that's something, that I think is the central reason why music and the arts and creativity is the most important thing that we can pass on to the next generation, because these simple skills and all these other hard skills, machines can already do it better than we can. What it can't do is care for one another better than we can.
I would hop in and just say that the most important thing about tools is that people just need to learn how to use them. I think there is a sense of fear around artificial intelligence in classrooms, in schools. And I think it's one that people don't understand. That's the first part. From a creativity perspective, I think that we can absolutely allow students to utilize these tools to help build that schema and that background that they need in order to make that connection. I'm really a big proponent of student voice. I think that's what the arts kind of does. It allows people to share their viewpoint from their lens, no matter where that might be. And what we wind up finding out is, as children and adults in the creative process, we find out that there's so much more that we have connecting us than separating us. And if we don't take the time to have the discourse and the conversation around what to do, I feel like the tool is just helping to elevate what Charles said. It elevates the amount of time that you can engage and interact with one another, personally share and learn from each other. It kind of gets away from a little bit of the research part, which isn't bad. I think it's a good balance, because it allows us to do more of that deep work. And that deep work is what gets us understanding, clarity, and ultimately varied perspective.
Courtney, you want to finish up with some thoughts in this area?
I just echo all of this. I mean, it's great. And just, I think by having creativity in your classroom and why it's so crucial, it also helps build community, just as we were touching on, with the human aspect of the arts. And when you have community in a classroom, you have everything. The sky's the limit there. I mean, you can just get students engaged in all the different subject matters, integrate them, because you have that community, that buy-in, and the trust within the classroom, not only trust with teacher student, but student to student. So it's a beautiful thing.
Amazing. Well, I think everyone shared just that the urgency is more of an opportunity, but the time is now to act. And so we'll segue to creativity in action. I think a lot of the times, educators, they say, okay, fine, I'll drink the punch. You say I need to bring creativity, tell me how, but I'm short on time. I don't feel like I'm creative. I don't have the supplies. The list could be endless, but there are solutions, and it takes creativity to bring those creativity opportunities to our students. So to share a little bit, I'll let you go first since you finished up, but to share a project example, something where that student voice, that confidence, community engagement, whatever it is, that it was shining because of the creativity that was brought forth in those moments?
Gosh, I mean, there's so many experiences in the classroom that I could bring up, but just even the quiet student who, you know, you noticed is always drawing and sketching in their notebook and didn't have the confidence to speak up during math time or language arts time. The one I'm specifically thinking of was an English language learner. But when we got to arts block time, he shined because that's where he found his role and where he saw himself in the classroom. And those little small creative moments can redefine a child's identity in school. And it can be the reason that they show up to school that day. It's, you know, just like for sports for some kids, it's the arts are that to others, and we have to give you know, all our students the chance to experience this so that they are engaged, motivated, and feel a part of something bigger and not feel alone.
I'll piggyback right onto that as you end the phrase with not feel alone. The inclusive nature that like the arts can bring learning to life in new ways. One of the most dynamic experiences I saw using Flipgrid during the last few years was an educator, Stacy Canopy, who had her students create augmented reality comic books where they used American Sign Language to bring the story to life. And so they were overlaying the video of students communicating through ASL into their comics books. But I just thought like the inclusive nature of art, because the universal language through pictures or visual dynamics, but layering on top of that through technology, this other communication piece was something that was so beautiful and so profound. But you know, those students were connecting in new ways or feeling, you know, just such a special, unique connection to the community, you know, to the community in all these different ways that we all communicate. So I loved that example. And I thought it was just this powerful mix of the art and the dynamic of the student creation, you know, coupled with the technology that made it inclusive and accessible.
I'll hop in. So mine is more of an example of allowing children to have their voice. So we used to do a Starry Night, which is a really famous, you know, artistic piece that people do. And it came out of a problem with a classroom management where the student didn't want to make their sky blue. And the teacher and the student couldn't get along, couldn't figure it out. And we wind up finding out that they wanted to make the sky look like the sky where their grandmother was from. So we wind up flipping the entire project and saying, we want you to research a place in the world that you want to learn about, you want to explore, and tell us what makes it a starry night and how does that starry night look. And what was amazing is that we had students who did every place in the world, which is incredible. But then we were able to bring in science, because we started to understand why, if you're closer to the equator, you might have orange skies versus if you're further north, you may have blue skies. And so then people started learning about geography, understanding what happens. We talked about weather patterns, what helps to make things different and how climate connects to that, which then took students on an entire research journey, which wind up going into a science classroom. So it wasn't created for that, but what it wind up doing is showing students how interconnected everything really is. And most importantly, they got to choose. And what we find every time is if students have some aspect of choice in their work, they are more committed, they are more focused, and they're more dedicated. And what we started seeing was all of this. So it turned into a book, and then people want to do more things. It was like, okay, time out. But what's better about all of it is we actually had students telling us, taking insight, taking input, and we can't stop learning because it doesn't stop when the doors of the classroom end. It continued on and it turned into something very beautiful. And again, community, creativity, research. So we're really reinforcing all the really important things we want our learners to do, which is to transfer their knowledge from in the classroom to the world.
I'll hop in terms of that creativity spilling outside of the classroom and into the rest of a student's life in their community, etc. I read an article recently about a highly scaled back Latino Culture Parade in Los Angeles. No, excuse me, in what was the place that burned? Pasadena. And it was scaled back because of the political climate, et cetera. It was not canceled. But I saw that a bunch of our schools were performing there, and they still showed up and they still performed. And I don't have my favorite hat here. It's Ruby Bridges. It's like a little baseball cap. It's got a little picture of Ruby Bridges. No one ever recognizes her, but I will explain it when anyone asks me. But I think the idea of young children feeling comfortable, or at least confident enough to say, "Hey, I'm here. I haven't gone anywhere, and I have every right to be here," etc. In a climate where sometimes they're made to feel unwelcome, is something that the arts brings as well, and that was pretty moving to me. And that gets back to this thing of art gives people voices. And I think that we in the United States have to really take a good, long, hard look in the mirror and say, are we still committed to the fact that everyone has a voice and every voice should be heard? And that's, I don't think we can take it for granted, but I think that is something that the arts the arts holds as its central promise. You and your thoughts and your creativity matter, and what you have to say is part of the human tapestry and has every right to be, in that bouquet along with everybody else.
I think one of the key things about creativity and teaching and learning it in school, and it's a muscle. I mean, it's an innate ability we all have, right? Sometimes we talk about this being a skill or something, and it is a skill, but it's a learned skill. The application of that innate skill is what we can help people with, and that leads to out of the box thinking, which is really about problem solving and addressing questions that we all have to deal with in life at every stage of life. And some of them are small questions about just growing up, and some of them are big societal questions. And I think that creativity skill set is so important to that out of the box thinking. And it's really important relative to supporting that. And there's ways that can just be shut down in a classroom and ways that it can be supported. As an anecdotal example, was I just read, maybe this is one of those made up things you see on social media, but you see these questions and answers from kids where their kids give very creative answers to questions. This one was a math question about reasonableness, where two children one ate 4/6 of the pizza and another ate 5/6 of the pizza. And the question was, which one ate more pizza? And the child said, well, I think the child with 4/6 ate more because he had a bigger pizza. And the teacher marked it wrong because 5/6 is bigger than 4/6. So, that's creative out of the box thinking relative to, at a very basic level, which comes from learning outside of a traditional, strict, rules-based academic learning process. And that only comes from exposure to, things like arts, music, math. I mean, maybe they learned it in geometry where they saw, but.
Yeah, I'll add that one of the greatest things about being an art teacher is that, you get to see creativity change students' lives on a fairly regular basis. And there's students that will go into the arts and become, directors and artists, and that's fantastic. But it art is good for the soul, right? So like creativity, being creative is good for everyone. So, one of the more powerful things is like when you have students come back, and maybe they went into business and they come back and they're just thankful for that sort of creative mindset that you brought to them. And, even if they're just drawing on the side for their own pleasure, or, they found a creative community that they connected to through the arts, that's always really powerful. And I think those are stories that sometimes we as art teachers kind of forget to tell, because you always want to lead with, the great successes. But I think, art is good for everyone, and being creative is something that could help you regardless of what occupation you are and what you're doing in life. It's one of the things that just unites us as a culture, right? So, that's the more powerful thing about being an arts teacher, is getting to see, how it affects every student. And that's my job. I feel like, you want every student to find creativity in whatever way works for them.
Absolutely. One of the things that we've heard a little bit tonight, and I hope we can dig a little bit deeper into that, is those unexpected ways that a student who gets that opportunity to bring their creative power. And it's, Charles, as you had said, it's creativity isn't something you learn, it's something that you reveal. It's something that's innate, and we just have to provide the right opportunity, the right scenario, the right recipe. So to ask the question for each one of you, what is something that an example, a moment that you've noticed where a creative opportunity or just that openness to let students sort of self-discover, has it turned into something where we realize this student's ability now that without this we would have never known? They would have just gone through the motions of the traditional classroom and not had a chance to shine. And let's start.
I'm gonna jump in because I already got an example.
I saw you ready to go.
So Rick, I got an example. So I will say, and I'll give this credit actually to Dave. Dave and I've met now almost 7-8 years ago. When we only offered, I'm gonna call them foundational. I don't use the word traditional. Foundational music practices, which is a band, chorus, and orchestra. And we have all these children who are living and experiencing totally different music outside of school than they are inside of school. It's like they don't even mirror each other. And we brought in modern band, we brought in music production. And I have to tell you, we were concerned about our numbers and kids weren't participating. We've gone up 35% in all of our schools. Every school, we have kids playing ukulele, we have kids playing guitar, we have kids who are out here DJing, helping to support their families, changing the generational wealth within their family because an opportunity of creativity was offered that wasn't previously offered. And so we've seen kids who are now have their degrees. They are touring the world as musicians. We're doing digital art. We have kids who are now creating their own coloring books, illustration. They're at Pratt. Like, we're seeing this enormous shift. And all it was our ability to open up one more lane, just one. And that one lane has now changed the trajectory of many children's lives, many families' lives. And so we're really proud of the work that we're doing. But I think it's this opportunity that there's not just a one way to be creative. There's not just one path. There's no such a thing as only just tradition. It is this beautiful fusion of allowing students to have the voice, the choice, to bring in some of their thoughts and to let them have a little bit of space. And with that, it has completely transformed what we do to the point where I can't get enough of everything I need because we have so many children that are interested. And more importantly, you see the pride and the joy and the commitment. We see kids who are saying, I wasn't coming to school, and now I'm here because this ensemble is what makes me want to come, because I'm seen and I'm heard. And if that's all that we do, that is worth its weight in gold.
Tim, what do you think? Share something.
Sure. Well, like there's lots of examples of this. I mean, it's always powerful. Like, I love taking projects that connect. So like, when I started as an art teacher, like it was almost like a factory, like I was playing the role of an art teacher, and that's sort of like, and then I realized like, I want, individual creativity. I want this to mean something to you. And I started really changing the way I was working and worked a lot more interdisciplinary, where I started working with other teachers, because you want to make it interesting, for everyone. And I think the intersection between these different subjects is always really interesting. So we started doing science projects. We started with like a mural that students designed, and then we made one for the school. And we just kept on scaling it up until we brought it out into the community. And when you bring it out to the community, then all of a sudden you get all this feedback where it changes the whole, vibe of the school. You start changing the culture, and creativity becomes something that's valued. And I think that's really powerful. And it makes an impact on all the students and the staff. I think, it's also important to understand that like lots of colleagues sometimes have different ideas about creativity and might not understand it as well. So, those projects become projects that define the school, and kids come back to work on even after they go to college and finish, and those culture changing projects are really powerful. So having students that, maybe they didn't even see themselves as creative, but they got involved and it sort of changes their life is always really exciting. And then you get to see out in the community the art and the creative, communicating the messages of science and math and these other subjects. And then you have a greater appreciation for creativity everywhere, which is super powerful.
And I'll jump in there with this idea of the creativity being a culture changer. And I'll, take a slight left turn. My wife does, she's a professor at Teachers College, and she runs a program called Civically Engaged Districts. I like to say that they do for civics education sort of what Music Will does for music education. In other words, instead of teaching civics like these are the different branches of government, this is how they interact, this is, et cetera, it's like, what is an issue that's important to you? And you're going to spend the semester addressing it. Now, that's pretty open-ended. And the kinds of things that you see, students identify that there's trash all over the place. They want to gamify throwing things out. So they paint the trash cans to look like R2-D2 and Spider-Man, et cetera. That's an art example, but it did change the culture of the school. But other examples would be young women complaining that there's no sanitary napkins or female healthcare products available, and having to go to the principal, to the superintendent, having to cross boundaries that students don't generally do. Or another great example was at a school district where it was majority Latino, very few Latino kids were participating in sports, and their peers were like, why? And they came up with some very simple interventions. Things weren't being sent home, translated, et cetera. And all of a sudden, there's much greater access. So when you talk about, and this is, again, creativity writ large, they're creating solutions to problems that they themselves are identifying and sensing and feeling. And one of the things that my wife likes to point out is that they don't always tie it up with a bow, but just the experience of like, hey, I'm going to wrestle with this problem that I have identified and with my peers. That's a very empowering and culture changing proposition.
So I'll jump in with like shared experience and play off of that word that you just said. One of my dear friends and former colleagues, Jaritza Vijalba, is in the chat. I can see her. I know she's watching on LinkedIn, but she spent time creating and curating global cultural exchanges, global climate exchanges, global musical exchanges. And you think about a shared experience when students are connecting with others around the world, sharing their first person experience, learning about cultures, the way that other folks around the world experience culture, music, their own unique identity. To me, that transforms through that shared experience, but words like empathy, awareness, mindset, confidence come from that because you're learning about yourself. You're learning about yourself in that learning process, but learning from other people just kind of scales out possibility. And I use my 7-year-old niece as like a gut check for a lot of things. She's a little tinkerer. She's a maker. She's a creative. And last year she said first grade was ruining her life. And it broke my heart as a former first grade teacher. But I know she was bored. I don't think she was challenged. And I heard her say, we have to do it the teacher way. I can't do it my way. And I think about all the different ways folks create, but how that is represented differently. And we all know kids are more than test scores. So like the confidence they gain in themselves through a wide range of experiences or creative opportunities, take and make and do something, right? Like that's why I feel so passionate about it. But that shared experience collectively transforms everything. And Courtney, you said it earlier, it's community. It's the human aspect that we all bring to it that to me is like what it does beyond the traditional, right?
And just to hop on that, this common theme I'm hearing and seeing from everyone through creativity is that we, is that some of us are doing, but we can also hope that more teachers will do this so that they can be seen as facilitators of discovery and not just content deliverers. And so that will then also change school culture. We'll shift from just looking at performance to growth. And that is all built within creativity. And, you know, I know teachers' plates are full. They've got so much they've got to do, but I just want to urge teachers, just start small, start with a spark, start with an art lesson, start with a poster, start with handwriting, start with music, integrating that into your subjects, and just see where it takes your classroom, because that is your community and that is what you can control, and that's what you're in charge of. So let's, you know, stick up to this challenge.
Charles, you have a thought to share, and then I have a story, and we'll segue to the next question.
Yeah, I just in terms of community building, and I think the cross-cultural confidence building element of collaborative learning together. I'm going to use an example of one of the other programs that we support through the Blackwing Foundation is up in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, and it's a poetry program. And they you know, that's where Homer Melville House is, and Longfellow and Oliver Wendell Holmes and Thoreau, and you know, there's all this great literary tradition up there. And they were taking kids who really have a really challenging environment there, and very low income, very challenging situation, and bringing them to poetry. And then we discovered this program through one of our music artists on our Blackwing label, who lives in the area, and he went in and met these people, and now he goes into the classroom twice, you know, 2, 3, 4 times a quarter, and he actually makes that bridge between poetry and songwriting. And he works with the kids. They're writing their own poetry, they're reading about poetry, they're learning about poets. Now they're working on a collaborative songwriting process where he takes them through the process. They write the whole song, the kids write it, then he comes in, he sets it to music, they record it, and he actually puts it up. And it's called the Fireside Poets program. And the songs, we post them up on Spotify now. So you can find their songs, and it's a big choral singing. And at the end of the school year, every year, this group also goes to this public park in the community, and they perform their things. They also do visual arts. The broader organization does more than just poetry, but also creative, you know, words and lettering and design type things. And so they take a park that they refurbished and rebuilt, and they bring community to the whole community by just presenting that and putting on the show and the concert for all that. And the kids really, you know, really thrive in that environment.
Amazing. So I'm going to share the question to let everyone have a chance to think over. And I am going to share a little bit of story of something that happened in one of the classrooms that I was teaching in years ago. So the question is about reimagining school. So if every student had daily access to creative exploration, creative tools, what do you think would change in the way that they learn and the way that teachers teach? So think for a moment, and I'm gonna share this story. So I had a program that I had developed over the years. I launched this at a few different schools. It was an entrepreneurship program, just focused on delivering the creative process around entrepreneurship, the business skills, and the ability to build strong communication skills. So we did different activities to develop one of the most important skills, I think, which is empathy. And I spent a lot of time in education trying to find ways to teach that and to allow students opportunities to bring that out in their classroom. And we did a game creation project. And the game creation project it was a requirement that the game should model empathy in some way. And that could be done in any way. And the goal is obviously model empathy and create a cool, interesting game. So there was a group of students that created a game where each individual player or each team, depending on how you set it up, had a certain amount of resources. Some resources are better than others, more advantageous. You can swap them. You know, this is nothing so groundbreaking. But one of the rules is that you have to help at least one other player in the game advance forward, or you cannot finish the game and finish the track and complete the game. And they were able to create this in a way that if I had to come up with create a game in this exact way, I wouldn't have come up with that. And that just goes back to that idea that it doesn't matter if you are a first grader or you've been teaching first grade for decades. Everyone in the room has an interesting perspective, an interesting contribution. And sometimes your students are the ones that show the greatest insight in learning in the classroom. So with that, we'll start with Dave in the center and reimagining school for teaching and for learning.
I think that I've heard it said, like, if you tell children what to do for their entire lives, and then when they're in college and you say, okay, now you can make all of these great choices, what you've really done is you've taught them how to not make choices for themselves. Our current school system is a relic in many ways of the factories of the 20th century and et cetera. So I think that when I reimagine schools, it's always about more distributed power, distributed leadership among students. It can make people uncomfortable at first, but there are many countries in the world, like Iceland would be one good example, where they actually, students spend fewer hours in school. The time that they're there, they have much greater agency, and the academic outcomes and the social outcomes are quite compelling. So rather than give a sort of I'll give this specific situation, at Music Will, our whole thing is student-directed repertoire. Students choose the music that they want to play. That alone is a radical proposition, because if I'm a clarinetist and my kid wants to play Bad Bunny or Taylor Swift or whatever, I may not have had any of the requisite, teaching to make me feel comfortable in that context. And so one of the things that we do with our teacher training, and that we get great feedback from all of our teachers, is we train teachers to be guides on the side. Use your domain expertise. That's great, but you don't have to be the sage on the stage with all of the answers. So I think that to really reimagine creativity requires people being able to make many choices and fail quite a lot, right? Because, I don't like the way that line, I'm going to erase that. I don't really like that stanza of the poem, or this song isn't good. Okay, fine. But if we're looking for these sort of standardized outcomes, meanwhile, our kids are going into a world that is going to be anything but standardized. So anyways, that would be my piece of advice would be, have it, as I reimagine schools, they've got to share more power and more agency with the students at an earlier age. And students will step up to that challenge, I believe, because if you show someone that you trust them, it's much harder to breach that trust. If you act like you're not trustworthy, if you treat students like they don't have the tools that they need to make decisions, they'll either blithely accept it or be somewhat resentful.
Yeah, I'll add that, I've had opportunities to go visit Ann at Adobe, and you see these amazing creative offices. And I kind of come back, I'm like, well, why is school not like this? It's a creative environment. And, so over my years of teaching, I've been visiting schools like the Blue Schools or the Lab School in DC, amazing places where things are taught through arts. And it's like across the board, people are happier. I think both the staff and the students are much happier. I think it's a more intrinsic, more authentic learning experience. And I think it's woefully needed in education, because we're still just too factory orientated. So it's really exciting to kind of see this opportunity. Technology helps push the way, and I've been working it in over my 27 years of teaching, and little by little. But we have to do it individually as teachers, and you kind of really hope that some systemic changes education a little bit in a positive way towards that.
Tim, you said something that resonated, and I just want to play off of this idea for a moment, is joy, recentering on joy in learning. And I think of when we engage students, whether it's through a creative pathway or an alternative form or a hands-on opportunity, you're getting that deeper engagement. What I called it was an emotional investment, right? And so they they emotionally invest in their own learning, which is the retention of information, greater ownership that drives their own learning. But like, that creates the flywheel of like, you light up when you're happy, you light up when there's joy. Like, teachers feel more passionate about their craft, students are drawn in completely different ways. We experienced it in my learning community, which transformed test scores, academic achievement, attendance rates. Like, so not to just have this pure Pollyanna mindset, but like coming back to finding joy in the midst of all the other things that are like overflowing people's plates right now. You know, that's how I want to reimagine it. I just want to reimagine more joy in the learning space.
Well, and to piggyback on that, it's all full circle here in that by having that joy, you have a sense of belonging. Students want to be at school. Teachers want to be at school. They're not just clocking in bell to bell. It all comes together when we have this full circle, all these components. So we have to keep fighting for that creativity.
Dr. Latasha.
How did you know? You were reading my mind. I mean, I can't say anything but ditto, 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 ditto. Like, I think, listen, to be very frank, right? Our schools are still operating on what was created from the cardinal principles. That is the structure of schools. We are still operating in that same structure from over 100+ years ago. Yet the people that we're serving in our schools, actually, most of the children that we serve in our schools were not even part of that design. And so when we're thinking about creativity in our schools, I think it's a need to probably go back to the drawing board and talk about what do we need in today's workforce. We know that, employers are telling us they need students who are able to collaborate, to work in tandem with one another, to be innovative, to be creative. And so the school structure that we're working in doesn't exactly align with that. And so I think it's just really necessary a time for us to really think about what are we trying to prepare students for? How do we want them thinking? And what are we hoping to continue in reference to innovation? And so that requires us to do something different. You can't yield on what you don't build. So we have to build, we have to grow for that, and really, really reflect on what we want children to do. Plus the fact these kids today are different. They're amazing. I have 3 of my own. They are interesting. They're teenagers. They know everything. And you can't kind of pull the wool over their eyes like when I was younger, because I didn't know. And I believe what you said, but my kids can fact check me. So it's really the integration truly of allowing the voice to be there, to utilize these tools that we have so accessible to us, and how to create some magic with that. And I love what you said, Dave, with trust. Like, they're great kids. They want to do something. They need some wiggle room, just like the bumpers in bowling, right? We just got to give them the bumpers and let them have some space. They will come to it. But it requires that you're not just being poured into, but that we are collectively making this work together. And that's where true learning is. Because remember, the person who talks the most is the person who learns the most. So if our kiddos aren't talking and leading the conversation, then someone else is really renewing their intellect and their knowledge.
Absolutely. Well, time flies when you are having fun, and this has been an incredible conversation. In the last minute before we wrap up, I just wanted each one of you who has given your time tonight and shared amazing insights to just leave just one short thought for educators watching tonight and who are going to watch the replay. What's one small action of creativity that they can bring into their classroom tomorrow that could make an impact? And we'll start with Courtney.
Well, it might be a little biased, but we have our programming Pathways to Creativity that we have developed for educators to seamlessly integrate the arts into their classroom. So if you don't know where to start and you're a teacher and you want something grab and go, we're a trusted source. It was made by teachers for teachers. So check out our programming Pathways to Creativity and start your classes tomorrow.
Anne.
I love that, Courtney. Thank you. My encouragement is don't be afraid to try something new. I also have another motto: push all the buttons, play to learn. I am so excited because Adobe has a tradition called the 12 Days of Creativity, and it's launching next month. And it is hands-on, fun, creative challenges to get students thinking outside the box. I'm so proud to be able to say Adobe Express for Education is completely free for K-12 students and educators. But as Courtney said, these resources are dynamic. They exist as a support for everybody. Don't be afraid to try something new, because we all know what happens when you step outside your comfort zone. Something magical happens.
Charles.
I would say it's about experimentation. Don't be afraid to experiment, right? That's what leads to change. That leads to improvement. You may try a few things. Don't get discouraged, because there's always something else that's going to work. So I think there's a lot of resources out there. We're at the Blackwing Foundation. We want to make those things available. We have just the 2 pathways now, but our goal is to keep growing those. We have collaborations we're talking about with other partners and others in other areas, and so just keep looking, keep coming back, and keep trying it if you're a teacher.
Dave.
Well, if you go to musicwillacademy.org, there's a bunch of free lessons and etc. But here's a fun activity. It's called a monkey list. It's a game you play with kids of any age. You find yourself on a desert island. The only thing you have is a belt. There's a monkey in a tree, and that's the entire, and there's coconuts there. Mm-hmm. Your job is to, in 1 minute, come up with as many uses for the belt as possible. And whoever has the most ideas wins. Now, I didn't say whoever has the best idea or the ideas that make the most sense. So if you say use the belt as a boat to get to the mainland, that's an idea. So what you'll find very quickly is some kids come up with very few, some kids come up with a zillion, and that's creativity in action. And it also is it's a tool to show people, look, if you let yourself think of great, if you give yourself permission, then that's when your list mushrooms. So that's a fun activity.
Dr. Latasha.
I would say ask your students. Like, why are you making it up? Like, they can tell you, and trust me, they want to tell you. So allow them to say, hey, how should we do this? Like, I have ideas, but I want to hear your ideas. And there's something to be said for building confidence of people to express themselves. And then I would say pull into what's the brilliance that your students know. They don't come as empty vessels. They know tons of stuff and they live life. So allow them to bring in those life experiences, because you never know how much more richer, deeper, and really impactful that learning can be when you allow them to just speak and share.
Tim.
Good call, Dr. Latasha. Yeah, I totally agree. Like, I started doing creative challenges for students that were voluntary. So like they weren't mandatory, and actually students were way more interested in doing them. So I posted a bunch of them on my YouTube, and then students started creating them. Every day is a new opportunity to be creative. I think really just try something new, and we're heading into November. So like celebrate what's you're grateful for about creativity. I think, we have to sort of like really educate the community about how important creativity is, especially now. So, what are you grateful for about creativity, and just share it.
Amazing. Well, I want to thank all of you for being part of the first forum conversation, this fireside chat. I want to thank the Blackwing Foundation for creating that opportunity to bring us all together. This is just one of many to come. So for those watching live, those watching replay, this forum and conversations around creativity from the Blackwing Foundation are going to be coming out to help each one of us not only reveal the creative genius that is inside of our students, but also to build our own creative genius, right? We also deserve to have a little bit of that creative energy to support our students. So thank you, everyone, once again. And everyone who's watching, you have a great rest of your evening.